Hi, and welcome to A Class of Their Own podcast, revealing the human stories behind their name. We will hear honest and intimate reflections from our guests who, despite their circumstances, shape a world that reflects their unique visions of success. Join me, Mira Magecha, to learn from these inspirational people and take the first step to make your own change. On today's episode, we're joined by Toni Kent. Hi, Toni.
Hi, Mira.
How are you?
I'm good. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. So we met about 6 months ago through the internet,
Yes.
the wonderful social media, and I'm really excited to see what this conversation's going to do and where we're going to go. I know you work within the social mobility space, so the conversation may be slightly different to what we've heard so far with other conversations. But let's start with, who is Toni?
Who am I? So I guess professionally, I'm a keynote speaker, writer, stand-up, who focuses on social mobility, women in business, working parenting, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Personally, I've got 2 dogs, 2 kids, 1 husband, live in the sticks, quite nice to come to London for the day.
I love the fact you started with 2 dogs, 2 kids, husband.
Yeah, that is the priority order in the house, basically, because the dogs will make the most fuss if they don't get attention.
How amazing. What kind of dogs do you have?
I've got Hungarian Vizslas. They're a type of gun dog, and I'm one of the worst possible people in the world because they're just for show. We don't work them.
But they're beautiful though.
They are beautiful, but I am very aware that owning dogs like that makes me, in some people's eyes, an absolute arsehole.
Okay, we'll move on then, shall we? We won't talk about your dogs. So in terms of your first hustle, I'd love to know how you first made money.
I first made money as a cleaner. Well, actually, I would have done babysitting when I was about 12 or 13.
Right.
So that was fun. I'm the eldest of 6 children. So, always been very hands-on, can change a nappy, that kind of thing. So that was the first way that I made money.
Thinking about your childhood, you've just said you're one of 6.
Yeah.
Where do you sit within that sibling hierarchy?
I'm the eldest.
Okay. And what's the age gap between eldest to youngest, you and your siblings?
There's 18 years between me and my youngest sibling.
Wow. That must have been an interesting household.
Interesting.
No further words required.
Well, yeah, I'd always thought I was never going to have children as a result. So it took me until I was 30, and then I thought immediately, I turned 30, I was like, oh my God, I need to have children right now.
Okay. All right. So tell me about growing up with 6 siblings in a single household.
So there was my mum and dad, and then they had 4 children. So me and 3 brothers. And then when I was 14, my dad died. And so we went from being very working class, dual income family in that my mum did part-time work. All the women on our estate had mum jobs. So
Right.
Cleaners, Avon ladies, worked down the local shop just to get a bit of, and I hate this term, but this is what they said, bit of pin money, because, just a little bit of money for the mum, just a tiny bit. But that's how my dad used to give all his wages over to my mum, and she did the household finances. So when he died, we were then single parent family, and we might get on to some of the stuff that happened, but my mum became pregnant not long after my dad had died. So then I have a half-brother, and then a couple of years after that, my half-sister was born, but my mum never remarried, never had a partner around, so it was very chaotic. And we kind of went from that. And something that's quite interesting is when people talk about council estates or working class families, there is a whole range within that.
Yeah.
So we had been that very kind of stable, 2 parents, 4 children. And then it was 1 parent, 6 children, My half-brother has some complex disabilities, so we had social services involvement. There was a lot of stuff going on, and we were reliant on benefits. So seeing how my mum struggled was what made me go, oh, I ain't never having children.
Yeah. And now you have two.
And now I have two. And on reflection, I know the reason I didn't want children was because I never wanted to end up on my own and struggling in that way. So there's a bit of self-preservation going on in there.
And so talk to me about growing up in the estate. What is it about your childhood that shows up in who you are today and just the journey of growing up? So I'm still quite noisy. I still can get a bit excitable. Like, oh, I need to have my voice heard, because everyone's like shouting and everyone's like wants to be the one that gets their needs met. I still think £100 is a lot of money. Yeah. And it is in lots of contexts, but given that at one point I had a corporate career where, I could shop at Waitrose and never check the price of anything, just load in the trolley and going on nice holidays and having all the things that come with having way more money than you need. Mm-hmm. If I've got to pay a bill or something and it's like £100 or a coat is £100, I still think, it's a lot of money. So there's that. I don't like arguments. I am fearful of confrontation and conflict. And that is something that, whilst I've worked very hard on, it does still show up. So there's those sort of things. I still like a good laugh, Growing up in a large family, because I'm one of 7,
wow.
I kind of understand shouting, having your voice heard, all of those things. But conflict was natural, or is natural in my family, in terms of we're not all going to agree because there's too many of us. So where does that desire to have and again, these weren't the words you used, but a peaceful life and not confront the conflict, where does that come from?
So, and again, I've thought about this a little bit. My mum had a lot of mental health problems, and actually, if I think about someone shouting at you or someone saying, well, I might as well kill myself, and it's that kind of, I think if I was to try and go into therapy mode or psychoanalysis, there's an element of a fear of rejection or loss or being pushed away. And I was talking to one of my brothers, actually, and he said to me, our dad used to have quite a temper, and I had sort of forgotten about this. And there were a couple of things he said to me, and I was like, oh my God. So there were times when there was an awful lot of, I think, shouting at children.
Right.
And so I think there's still an element for me, which is if that person is shouting at me, that means that either I've done something wrong or I'm going to be rejected. And you think I'm nearly 50 and these things still are pretty deeply baked in. Yeah. So I think for me now, I have always wanted to create that emotional stability, no money worries, no familial worries, if that's a thing. I don't want my kids hearing stuff like that. I don't want my children in situations like that. And that is really, really hard not to repeat.
Yeah. And you mentioned that your dad passed away, unfortunately, at the age of 14. How has that loss impacted the next teenage years, I suppose, before we go into the corporate and the adult life? How did that impact you at that point, and being the elder sibling, and then 2 newer siblings not fathered by your dad impact you?
So...
There was a lot in that question.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And, I make a living out of speaking about things like this. So I went completely off the rails in many respects. And this is something that's interesting. I'm still in touch with a few of my childhood friends. We were wild. So just drinking, drugs, smoking, you go down the park. You knew the shops you could go to where you could buy alcohol. We used to be able to get a 1-year passport, but that was paper. So you could rub out the last digit on the date of birth, which I think is treason. You can't get one of those anymore. So we had access to drugs and alcohol, and we would just go out and go wild. That said, I did have a job. I did go to school. I did help with my siblings. I was my mum's birthing partner for both of her subsequent pregnancies. I was very involved. So when you read social services notes about your family, and there was a reflection that me and my oldest brother, next to me in age, were in sort of pseudo-parenting roles. And it is things like you think, well, that's not normal, actually, or it's not desirable. It does happen in many, many families, but when you see things like that, you go, God, yeah, probably I shouldn't have been leaned upon in that way by my mum, but what are you going to do? You're going to help each other. So, it was like pretty crazy, but I did have a lot of fun as well. You know, I had good friendships. I had two friends who lost a parent at the same time as me, so we kind of stuck together. But I did also get excluded from my, it was fifth year, the year you finish GCSEs. Yeah. I wasn't allowed to go to the disco because I turned up drunk.
Oops.
Yeah, oopsie.
When you talk about going off the rails and going off the radar, were you also aware that you were taking on that responsibility of being a pseudo-parent at that point, or is it later in life that you read the social service notes about the role that you were playing?
Yeah, I think that's an important point, because there are things that people say about you who are in a professional context, which doesn't mean that is you. But I kind of knew, I don't know, there was all this thing of you have to help each other. You have to all stick together. And my mum was having babies at the same time as some of my friends. So my friends would be taking their babies out in a pram and I'd be taking my, little brother.
Yeah.
So that was, it's a strange thing in that we were quite independent. I knew how to earn money. I knew how to budget. I knew where to get things. I knew who I could ask for help. So I was very competent in lots of different ways. And the thing that I did decide was that I never want this to be my life. So I felt like I wanted to help and I had to help. But at the same time, I 100% knew that I wanted to get out as soon as I could.
What did you do to help you get out?
What did I do? Well, I got a job, first of all. So on my 16th birthday, I started working in a fruit and veg shop because I thought you need to earn money. And, and if I could get a full-time job, then I could leave. But I realised you don't earn money working full-time in retail. You can't leave home at 16.
Right.
So I then realised I needed to go back to education. So I'd done okay in my GCSEs. I got 2 A's for English. The rest weren't great, but I think that showed that I was bright. So I went to college. I did A-levels in English and psychology. I was told I could go to uni. I could apply to uni, but I couldn't afford to. There was no way I was going to go. So I did an NVQ in secretarial procedures, and I learned to touch type, and that made me employable.
The best skill ever.
Yeah, I'd be like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you then got into the corporate space. Is that what happened next?
I got a job at Reed Employment.
Okay.
Yeah, which was in Reading, which was not where I lived at the time. So I got this job. I got the offer letter, and I remember showing my mum, because I think the salary was something like £8,500, and I couldn't believe it. It was as a branch administrator, and I just thought, I've made it in the world. So I left home, I rented a room. My mum was not happy about that. And then I realised that you can't live out of home and commute to another town every day. So then I moved to Reading and rented a room, which gave me that independence to kind of live properly as an adult. It was really hard financially. It was really difficult. it was hard to make new friends. I made friends like fairly easily. I made friends easily, but there was that I had to kind of shut the door on a lot of friendships for a while. And, you know, my mum was like, you need to be here. Why aren't you here? Why aren't you coming back every weekend? So that was a emotional tie that was difficult to kind of loosen, if you like.
What was the relationship between you and your elder siblings? Because you leaving home may have impacted them, and you said it was also an emotional burden almost of not being available and being at home every weekend. What was that moment, if you were to transport yourself back there? What were the feelings that were going on for you at the time?
So I tell you, I remember my mum wrote me this note that said something like, good riddance to bad rubbish. I mean, that's like,
wow.
And I do think that, you know, I was really hurt by that. But it was her way, I think, of saying, I need you. And I do think, for my next sibling down, you know, he had to do an awful lot, and it's kind of passed down then, isn't it? And I guess I did as much as I could in terms of going back, replying to letters, helping with things, financially helping, or just being around, just going back and saying hi and seeing everyone. But I think, yeah, when it does change the dynamic, because then you kind of got this one has left home and appears to be earning their way, you know, doing great things, having great fun, doing all the things that they want to do. And, you know, my mum would say things like, oh, and I'm left here. I have to do all this all by myself. It's like, well, I'm an adult now, so can I go and do my adult life? You know? Yeah.
Psychologically, that's got to have been tough, though.
I think I just used to get pissed and cry.
Pissed and cry.
Just get pissed and then cry. But I had really great friends, and I think one of the biggest themes throughout my life is I have such good friendships. I know so many women who are I just love them. And I think for me, one of the biggest gifts in my life has been the friendships that I have and still enjoy. And
were they the people that you turned to when things got too much? Were they the people who helped and supported you and helped you stand up and kind of go, this is the life I want to lead?
Yeah, I see. And also, I met my husband when I was 20. And there have been a few times, and I will always remember, he said to me once, you know, you don't have to go back every single weekend. And it was a revelation to me. And I think it's weird, like you shouldn't need permission to realise what it is you actually want to do with your life. But I found that very, very hard, because I think I was always very conscious of how difficult it was for my mum. You know, she had a really difficult, really hard life. And you kind of end up thinking, oh, but it's so difficult for them. It would feel selfish for me to say, I don't want to come this weekend. But actually, when you're an adult, you can say, I don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. My husband's been, I was so lucky to meet him, I think. And he's very lucky to have me.
Met you, yeah.
But I think there is that thing of having a stable adult partnership, relationship, that has been hugely important. And I read a great piece which said, for career development, you know, for women, you need to, your choice of partner is a big factor in what happens for you in your professional life. And I think it is true. And
so what has happened for you in your professional life post branch administrator at Reed?
I went to work for a freight company. I was a sales admin there, and it was through one of the guys there that I met my husband. had a great laugh there. It was highly everything that's not appropriate in the workplace today happened there.
Yep.
I got to travel on business for the first time, and I thought, I want to be doing that. I got to take clients out for lunch. I thought, I want to be doing that. Working in sales. That suits me. And then I went from there to work for a IT reseller in their sales team. Had a great time there. Saw how much money you could make in tech. Thought, this is the sector.
Yeah.
Went on to work for a software company, and then that company eventually got bought by Microsoft, and I spent 10 years there in a variety of different roles. Got my first, got to manage, do people management, and I managed alliances between Microsoft and some of their partner community, which I really enjoyed. I learned so much. I learned about what it's like to be in a global corporate, and I also learned what it means to operate and run a small business who's reliant on a big vendor. Really interesting. Learned loads.
And so how do you end up being a keynote speaker, a stand-up comedian, and doing what you do now from that point?
So I got the job I always wanted, and it didn't like it, hated it. And it coincided with a few things. So a couple of women in my life became very seriously ill. I had my 2 children by this point. And this was the thing about corporate. And this is why I think, again, things like who you meet and marry or partner with is so important. So when I got pregnant, the maternity policy was amazing. Got 6 months on full pay. I was like, I'm having that. And then I went back. And I did say to my husband at the time, I was like, if you want to stay home, you could stay home if you like it. I don't want to do that. So the kids went into full-time nursery. But then a couple of women in my life with children a similar age became ill. One of them died. And I thought, I was working in a really high-pressure job, really long hours. It wasn't great for me. I wasn't kind of enjoying myself. I wasn't being successful within the role. And I thought, actually, I don't come to work to be so bloody miserable.
Right.
And one of the things, I guess, that comes from my background is I was never frivolous. I mean, I can spend money, but I always put bonuses kind of into the house, put it away, save it. And that meant that when I chose to leave, I could leave going, all right, I've got some money in the bank. I've got time to think. So I went freelance doing alliance management. I had some great support when I was exiting, where a mentor said, before you go, have a chat to some people and say, would you hire me if I was freelance? Amazing advice. Then I started writing a blog called Reasons to Be Cheerful about my experiences of leaving corporate and my background. Then senior leaders started saying to me, oh, Toni, I should be doing blogs, but I haven't got the time. So I started ghostwriting.
Okay.
Found I was quite good at that. And then the blog became a book, like a collection of essays. I was really inspired by Caitlin Moran.
Yeah.
So she did her Moransology, which was a collection of essays. And I thought, oh, you can produce a book like that. So I did that. And I got asked to go in and speak about my career journey. And it kind of just happened from there. And then I'd always wanted to try stand-up. I was absolutely bricking it. I couldn't figure out why I wanted to try it, but I did. And then I found that most of what I spoke about was related to class, related to my experiences, and that led to being booked for keynotes, and I use humour as part of that, and that just kind of has been where it's led to.
Wow. What an interesting and unconventional journey.
Yeah, it is unconventional.
This episode is brought to you by Adaventa, a leading online classifieds group and champion for sustainable commerce. With over 25 digital marketplaces including Marketplaats, Leboncoin, Mobile.de, Klein & Zanger, Photocasa, InfoJobs and Kijiji and more, they connect millions of people to trade on a daily basis. Adaventa is committed to being purpose-driven and both an inclusive work and marketplace for everyone by creating a space where everyone feels like they belong and are valued for their difference. To find out more information, click in the links in the show notes below. Some of the stuff that I've read on the social platforms that we've connected on is you showing your level of vulnerability and your honesty about who you are, where you've come from. If there are people out there who are scared, fearful, or just wondering if they should share more of who they are, especially within the workplace and be their authentic self for a better term, what would your advice be, and what's the process that made you want to be more of who you are?
So I found actually that the more I was myself, I'll show you something. So this here, can you see that? It's a little
Lego figurine.
Yeah, she's a stormtrooper. So I met this guy at Microsoft called Toni Kent, and alongside his day job, he did art, like Lego artwork, and he had this Lego stormtrooper. And in the picture, which is on the front of one of my books, she's taken off her helmet. She's holding a helmet and she's like shaking out her pink hair. And I saw this and thought, oh my God, that is like me. So you like take off the corporate armour and you shake out your pink hair, and then you can show people who you actually are.
Right.
And I found that when I spoke about my experiences, what would happen is people would come up to me, normally at off-sites, when everyone's had a drink, and go, oh my God, Toni, thank you. Can I just tell you this thing that happened to me? And I'm like, yes, you can tell me. And I think, and you do have to be careful with what you choose to disclose to people. But I found that in me sharing my vulnerability, if you want to call it that, other people felt safe to tell me things that were happening for them, because we do fear judgment and we do fear being excluded. But the thing that interests me is when they say, like, bring your whole self to work.
I love that saying.
But not that part.
Leave that at the door.
Yeah, not that part. And I was kind of thinking about this because some of the behaviours that I have witnessed over the years, and lots of people have in the corporate workspace, is like people are bringing their, I like to pretend I'm not married to work, or I like to go and shark on the graduates to work, or I like to shout at my team. So there were times when I thought, maybe I shouldn't share where I've come from. But, there were times when I had to, because people would say, well, where did you do your degree? And I go, I haven't got a degree. Well, why haven't you got a degree? How did you get a job here? I said, well, do you actually want the full story? So I think it is, we can feel like, I mustn't share this thing about me. But I found it goes all the way up to the top as well. There's some senior execs I've worked with who have said to me it isn't until they've got into their like mid-50s until they've like made partner, that they can reveal that they did grow up in a single parent household or on a council estate. And that's a shame, really, because what you end up with is where everyone's trying to emulate. And I certainly did it in my early career. So, my Lego armour, if I wear this dress and have hair with these highlights and I wear this kind of jewellery, then I am giving off the correct message.
Yeah.
But that wasn't actually who I was.
So what gave you that confidence to delayer?
I suppose realising some of the fun, actually getting some enjoyment back, because there was a mentor, the one who helped me as I exited corporate, and he said, I can see you're not happy. I can see that what the job requires of you is not fulfilling you. And actually, I am very creative. I love to talk to people. I'm really naturally curious. I really care about other people. And I needed to do something, and I love to communicate. So I was doing completely the wrong kind of job, because in my trying to use the skills that I had naturally, I was not ticking the boxes on the scorecard. So, I think it was that support from others, and encouragement from others. And actually, even today, there's a friend of mine that's like, oh, Toni, you always find a way. And I kind of keep that close to me, because when there's times when it feels difficult, and it is hard. I've been freelance for 13 years, and there are times when it's really difficult. And she said to me, you always find a way, Toni, and keep doing it. And that kind of gives me encouragement.
The cheerleading.
Yeah.
Having the right cheerleaders around you is really important.
Yeah, it is.
You currently live in a world that is very different from where you grew up.
Yeah.
And you have friends and children who haven't grown up in the same circumstances that you have.
Yeah.
How do you manage those two dichotomies in the world that exists for you today?
Well, and it's funny because a lot of people say, just enjoy it, just be happy. I came to realise that there are structural inequalities that mean that some people will never get access to the opportunity that they deserve. There are people that want to keep it that way, the way we're structured as a society. Some parts of it need to keep it that way. And it's really upsetting for me to, I guess in a way you feel like you're part of it, you know. Are you part of what enables that to happen? And so, you know, I was sat down with a member of my family and he said, oh, so what are you planning? What will happen next? You know, we'll pay off the mortgage and buy our kids' cars. That is my reality. I will pay off the mortgage, we'll buy our children cars. And for people that I'm related to, some of the things that I get to enjoy as part of an everyday life, they will never have access to, because that is the way that society is structured. Some early decisions on their part that, you know, I could make a bad choice tomorrow, I'm not going to lose my house.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully not. I have, you know, it's things like that. I've got some pension pots from when I was at Microsoft. It's nice, isn't it? If it all went tits up, we could sell our house and take that money and live somewhere else. We could move somewhere cheaper. I have got so many options and I've got so much choice by virtue of, and some people say, well, it's because you worked hard. And yes, I did work hard and I made some difficult choices, but I was lucky by virtue of birth order. You know, I had 14 years of growing up with both parents around. When our family went through crisis, I was old enough to kind of see what might happen and see how choices that you make can inform certain outcomes. So there was a lot of luck on my part. Lucky that I'm bright, you know, lucky that I can communicate. There's so many things that I think it frustrates me to see how some people will just get trapped and stuck. I just went on a right old ramble there.
Is it luck? Or is it that you made some choices? Is it that you worked hard? Is it that you saw the choices that you made had different outcomes if you did something different? Is it the people around you and the people you chose to surround yourself by that helped you? Or is it genuinely luck?
I think there is a combination. It's a combination of those factors. You know, had I been born 20 years later into the circumstances that my mum was in then, I don't know. You know, it would be so much harder. So yes, there's some conscious decision making, and actually one of the things, if I'm giving a talk, so if that involves young people, for example, you know, one of the biggest gifts that I had as I became a teenager was deciding what I didn't want.
Yeah.
So I was like, right, I don't want to have children at that point in time. Don't want to have children. I don't want to live like this. And that I think can be as much of a a factor as saying, I do want to have a nice car, or I do want to go and work in America. I did always look at different options and go, okay, if I want to get there, how do I get to it?
Yeah.
Can I speak to someone that's already doing it? Who was it? Oh, I think this might have been your Lisa Goodchild episode where NO meant next opportunity. Love that. No, next opportunity. So I'm like, I'm having that. I think that's really good advice. Just keep asking. So I had loads of no's from lots of people. No, you can't work here. No, we won't employ you. No, I won't be your boyfriend.
The classic one.
Yeah. No, you're not coming in here wearing that. And I was always, it's funny, I think was always optimistic. And maybe that's part of what I've been trying to find again, is I felt like some of my optimism, as I became more aware of how inequalities come into play, it knocked some of my optimism out of me. And
so how are you building that back up?
Good question. So we talked kind of prior to this, there's some work that I'm going to start doing in schools, but it's not official yet. So there's that, because I think I felt like I was trying to help people individually. And I think lots of people that are, have similar circumstances to how I grew up, you feel like you must help everyone, but not everyone wants you to come in and be a superhero. Some people are actually very happy with the way things are. You know, what you want isn't necessarily right for other people. And I wanted to be able to make a positive impact to young people who would have been, or who are like how I would have been. So full of ambition, full of optimism, certain of wanting to create something different. So I think that is what I'm kind of doing on that part.
You touched on 20 years later, it may not have been the same thing for you, and your circumstances may have been different growing up, and being that child may have led to different decisions. When you think about you and your siblings, what's the differences? What's the life that it could have been if you weren't where you are today?
I don't know, and I'm kind of cautious about what I share. Do you know what I mean? I know, I guess, if I look across my peer group, actually, people I went to school with, you know, and I look at what happened to other young people growing up where I did at the time, there were people who went to prison, there were people that died due to substance abuse, people struggling with substance abuse today, people who have been through really challenging situations and remain in that place. So I think one of the things that is true, you know, when they talk about the impact of like poverty or lack of access to opportunity on young people, there is increased likelihood of being involved with the criminal justice system, poorer health in every aspect, whether it's dentistry, mental health, you know, physical health, autoimmune disease. Everything that they tell you about the impact of poverty on someone's life, chances and opportunity, all of that is true.
Yeah.
So, and it was one of the things that was a realisation for me was I'd looked at the Institute for Fiscal Studies, household median income, and from where I started to where I got to would take 5 generations normally, and I had managed to achieve that in the space of, I don't know, probably 20 years, you know, because that corporate career, outside of the financial benefits it gave me, it also gave me amazing things like personal skills training. Is that the right word? I got so much personal development working there.
But also the network, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, amazing network. Yeah. And that's quite interesting. Actually, if I think about the people that, if I say to my kids, you know, if we were to look across my children's parents or my friendship group, be like, she's a an accountant, she's a solicitor, she's an architect, all of these professional career women. The network that my mum had, which was still a powerful one, you get a group of mums together, they're going to fix the world. But there was none of that. It was,
different.
It was very different, yeah. And what I do love, what is interesting actually about that whole network piece was the women that I met in my very early 20s, we were just a group of 20-year-old young women exploring the world, trying to figure stuff out. And we've gone through that process of becoming mothers. And one of them's a chief marketing officer, one of them's a director of D&I, one of them's, it's like I'm trying to show off now, but I'm amazed in a way. It's like they are just my friends. But when you look at them as professional women, it's like, what powerhouses.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm part of their gang and I love it.
Yeah, and you deserve to be there.
Yeah.
In terms of looking at your children's lives and how they're growing up compared to yours, again, a big assumption, probably not too far wrong, but they're growing up in a different world. Yeah. They're growing up with different circumstances, different friends, different opportunities. How do you balance that with your own growing up and them understanding the value of your circumstances compared to where they are today?
I'm very open with them, and always. And the thing is, once your kids go to senior school, they will Google you. The first thing they will do is Google each other's parents. So there's
that a thing?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So there's no hiding for me. Given what I do, there's no hiding. But we've always been very open, and I think, and we maintained relationships for us. And when your children are very small, you can do that. We go and see the family, go every Sunday, go and see the family. And then there comes a point where they have so many clubs that it just is difficult to maintain. Yeah. And it's funny because when my children look at pictures of me growing up, like family Christmases, they'll go, oh, that looked really fun. It was really fun. And so in some regards, I know that there is a fondness for them in looking at a very busy, lively, loud, messy, just that for them, there is an element of them going, that looks really like fun.
Yeah.
Versus, they had a lot of organised clubs and stuff like that. There wasn't a lot of chaos. You weren't going to go drawing on the walls. But I think it means that they've got a very wide frame of reference and they've got great empathy when it comes to friendships and understanding the experiences of other young people. I like to think they are not very judgmental. They're open to people that have different household situations to them, because the sad fact is that children are bullied at school today. If they, for whatever reason, anything that they can pick on, it still happens. And I was thinking about, so one of our good friends, she died, and our son and her son, very good friends, and watching my son and his friend sort of be there for each other, and for him, just, the way that he talks about what his friend might be experiencing and what he's going through, that says to me that it was right to be really open about what my experience was of childhood bereavement, what that did to my family. So hopefully that kind of sheds a little light.
And do they see their cousins often now?
Not now, because they're just, one of my kids is off driving, so she's like, doing her own thing, and the other one is, the weekends are for football. It's the law. Okay. So it's funny because I think I'd kind of grown up with this image of, or we were told, it's all about family. But sometimes that can be quite claustrophobic. Yeah. And it can fail to acknowledge that people are separate individuals, that, you know, you are part of this thing. It's something that I kind of explored in respect to my own expectations around or beliefs around family life. And, you know, because for many years I've felt that I don't know, they talk about having unwritten rules in families, and you must not say this and you must not do that, and these are the expectations, and it can be quite hard to kind of break free of that.
Yeah. But you managed it.
Yeah. And it's something you still have to navigate and negotiate. I think that if you want to maintain relationships into adulthood, you know, for a lot of people, I think it's hard to break away from that, what the relationship was when you were very small children, you know, because you're not kids anymore. And that, I think a lot of people actually find hard to navigate.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Mira.
If you enjoyed that conversation, then please share A Class of Their Own podcast with your friends and family, and keep spreading the word to those that haven't discovered us yet. It makes a huge impact on our ability to have the people you want. Keep being you through connection, learning, and play. You are a class of your own.